Just leaning up against the side of my car.
Okay. You're fine, man. You're fine. Turn around for me.
I don't have any.
Okay. Yes, sir. I see that. Okay. This is your wife and son?
And son.
Okay.
It's bad. It's bad. Check the pulses.
Yes, sir. This is the firearm you brought from inside the house?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I went and got. This is a long story. My son was in a boat wreck a few months back. He's been getting threats. Most of it's been benign stuff we didn't take serious.
Okay.
You know, he's been getting like punched. I know that's somebody. I know that's what it is.
Okay. When did you get home? Right when you called, or did you go to the house first? Where is the house?
I came to the house first. My mom has late stages Alzheimer's, and my dad is in the hospital.
Okay.
I left. I don't know what time. I can go back on my phone and tell you the exact times. Did you check?
Okay. Did I check what?
Did you check them?
We got medical guys that are. That's what they're gonna do. Okay.
Jury deliberations began this afternoon in the double murder trial of Alex Murdaugh, the disgraced attorney accused of gunning down his wife and younger son. The jury got the case after hearing the defense's final argument, and there's a new woman sitting on the panel after the judge threw another juror off the case. Les Trent explains why.
You're off the jury. The judge presiding over the Alex Murdaugh trial booted a juror today.
Intentionally or unintentionally, you've had some discussions with some folks not on the jury, and which is going to require me to remove you from the jury.
They even told her to immediately leave with all her personal belongings, including hard-boiled eggs she left behind in the jury room.
We get a lot of interesting things, but now a dozen eggs.
Her place was taken by an alternate chosen at random by number.
Juror number 254.
We are now down to only one alternate, so that may make some parties a little bit nervous.
Now that the case has gone to the jury, attention is focused on the anonymous panel, which will determine Alex Murdaugh's fate. There are 7 men and 5 women. I spoke to jury consultant Alan Turkheimer. After 6 weeks of testimony, I'm wondering if you have any idea just how tense those deliberations might be behind doors.
It's going to be exhausting for this jury. It's not easy. Now, at first, they're going to, after having not talked about it for 6 weeks, it's very cathartic. They're going to talk about what they liked and didn't like. It's burdensome psychologically, and these jurors are going to go through a lot.
At least one juror was seen having trouble keeping his eyes open yesterday during prosecution closing arguments.
There were reports of a juror, maybe 2, one of them maybe nodding off, not paying attention, etc.
Today, it was the turn of Murdaugh's lawyer, Jim Griffin, to present closing arguments. He ridiculed the suggestion Murdaugh killed his wife, Maggie, and son, Paul, to distract from his financial crimes that were about to be exposed.
The state's theory is that, that it was a storm a-coming. Clouds are arising. And because of that, he does what every rational person would do. Go kill your wife and son. Totally illogical, irrational, and insane. Those are the words I wrote down. On behalf of Alex, on behalf of Buster, on behalf of Maggie, and on behalf of my friend Paul, I respectfully request that you do not compound a family tragedy with another. Thank you.
If you're drawn to the stories hidden in the shadows, subscribe to Dark Corner True Crime, where every case has a secret waiting to be uncovered.
In the quiet towns of South Carolina, the Murdaugh name carried weight. For nearly a century, 3 generations of Murdaugh men held the office of solicitor in the 14th Judicial Circuit, essentially deciding who faced justice and who walked free. Their influence stretched far beyond the courtroom. The family law firm, founded in 1910, became a powerhouse in Hampton County and the surrounding areas, handling cases that ranged from personal injury to wrongful death. In this world, wealth and connections weren't just perks, they were shields, and Alex Murdaugh inherited all of it. On the surface, Alex appeared to have it all. A respected attorney, husband to Maggie Kennedy and father to 2 sons, Buster and Paul, he epitomized Southern success. Their sprawling 1,700-acre hunting estate, Moselle, symbolized the Murdaugh family's legacy, wealth, prestige, and power. But beneath the polished veneer, Alex was living a life riddled with secrets, addiction, and deception. By the early 2000s, Alex had become addicted to prescription painkillers, consuming up to 60 oxycodone pills a day. Maintaining such a habit, even with wealth, was costly, so he began to steal. Over nearly 2 decades, Alex siphoned approximately $8.8 million from clients and his own law firm, often targeting grieving families seeking compensation for wrongful deaths. He created a fake account under the name Richard Alexander Murdaugh DBA Forge, mimicking a legitimate settlement consulting firm, funneling money away without anyone suspecting. He became a master liar, so convincing that colleagues described him as someone who could deliver elaborate falsehoods while staring straight into someone's eyes. But the cracks in Alex's carefully constructed world started with his son, Paul. On February 23, 2019, a night that should have been ordinary, a dinner, drinks, and a boat ride with friends, ended in tragedy. Paul, intoxicated and underage, drove the family boat recklessly through Archer's Creek. In moments, the vessel struck the bridge, launching bodies into the dark waters. 17-year-old Mallory Beach was killed. And in the aftermath, the privilege and power of the Murdaugh name became glaringly obvious. Paul faced minimal immediate consequences, and the family began to manipulate the narrative to shield themselves from scrutiny. This night, seemingly separate from Alex's own crimes, marked the beginning of a series of events that would unravel the Murdaugh empire. Addiction, greed, and a sense of untouchable power were converging, setting the stage for the shocking murders that would shock the nation, and eventually bring Alex Murdaugh to the attention of prosecutors, investigators, and the world. Before the world knew Alex Murdaugh as a convicted murderer, another tragedy had already begun to expose the cracks in his carefully constructed life. Gloria Satterfield, the Murdaugh family's housekeeper for over 2 decades, was more than an employee, she was family. She had helped raise Alex's sons, Buster and Paul, and was deeply trusted by the entire household. But in February 2018, Gloria suffered a fatal accident on the family property. She fell down the front steps, sustaining injuries that would ultimately take her life on February 26, 2018.
4147 Moselle Road.
In 2018, Maggie herself called 911, reporting their housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, had fallen. She did not survive.
Her head is bleeding. I cannot get her up.
The official story Alex told was simple. Gloria had tripped over the family dogs. It seemed like an accident, a sad but ordinary misfortune. But as we would later discover, nothing about the Murdaugh family was ordinary. Immediately after Gloria's death, Alex approached her sons, Tony and Brian Satterfield, claiming he felt responsible for their mother's passing. On the surface, he appeared generous, even remorseful. He suggested they file a wrongful death claim against him so that his insurance would cover a settlement, and he even recommended a lawyer, a close friend of his, Corey Fleming. The Satterfield family, trusting and grieving, agreed. What they didn't know was that Alex's generosity was a lie. The insurance settlement, which eventually amounted to $4.3 million, never reached Gloria's sons. Instead, Corey Fleming and a banker named Chad Westendorf funneled the money into a fake account Alex had created under the name Richard Alexander Murdaugh DBA Forge. Every penny of the settlement, money meant to ease a grieving family's loss, was stolen. This theft wasn't a one-time event. It was part of a nearly 2-decade-long pattern of financial deception. Alex siphoned millions from client settlements, exploiting vulnerable families who trusted him during their darkest hours. His addiction to prescription painkillers, at one point reaching 50-60 pills per day, provided both motive and cover for his elaborate schemes. Every lie, every fake account, every stolen dollar was another brick in the wall of deception Alex had built around himself. By early 2021, Maggie Murdaugh, his wife, had begun to sense something was deeply wrong. Friends would later testify that she had expressed concerns about missing money and Alex's secretive behavior. She even considered consulting a divorce attorney. Meanwhile, legal pressures were mounting. The Beach family wrongful death lawsuit against Paul Murdaugh loomed large, threatening to expose Alex's financial crimes. The stakes had never been higher, and for the first time, the Murdaugh dynasty's untouchable image began to crack. This chapter of lies, theft, and hidden truths set the stage for what would come next, a convergence of addiction, ambition, and a desperation so extreme that it would culminate in murder. The question was no longer if Alex Murdaugh would face consequences. It was when. June 7, 2021, started like any other summer day on the sprawling Moselle estate, the 1,700-acre hunting property in rural Colleton County, South Carolina. But as the sun set that Monday evening, the Murdaugh family's carefully constructed world of wealth, power, and influence would collapse in a violent, shocking instant. By the night's end, 2 lives would be brutally ended, and the patriarch of the family would stand at the center of one of the most horrifying crimes in modern American history. Alex Murdaugh, the respected lawyer and head of a legal dynasty, had been living a life on the edge. The Beach family civil lawsuit against his son Paul threatened to expose decades of financial deception. Earlier that day, Gene Seckinger, the law firm's chief financial officer, confronted Alex about nearly $800,000 in missing client funds. The conversation was tense. Alex gave vague explanations, seemed evasive, and promised documentation he never provided. Unbeknownst to anyone, the clock was ticking toward a night that would forever change South Carolina's perception of the Murdaugh family. Around 7:00 p.m., Alex and Paul drove together across the estate, recording mundane Snapchat videos and laughing about crooked trees. But the normalcy of those moments masked the horror that would unfold in just hours. By 8:31 p.m., Paul was tending to the dogs near the kennels, and Maggie, wary yet trusting, had joined him. The last video Paul recorded at 8:44 p.m. captured laughter and familiar voices, his father Alex, his mother Maggie, and his own. A seemingly ordinary family moment, frozen in time, would soon become a key piece of evidence against Alex. Investigators would later determine that in the 4 minutes following that video, Alex retrieved a 12-gauge shotgun and a .300 blackout rifle from the main house. He approached Paul first, firing at point-blank range, ending the life of his 22-year-old son. Maggie, realizing the horror, tried to flee, but Alex pursued her with the rifle. Multiple shots struck her as she ran. 2 more were fired into the back of her head. In mere minutes, the entire family dynamic shifted from one of wealth and privilege to a scene of unimaginable tragedy. By 10:07 p.m., Alex placed the 911 call that would be replayed in court for months. He claimed to have discovered the bodies, portraying himself as a grieving father and husband. Yet forensic evidence, phone records, and surveillance videos would tell a different story, one that painted Alex not as a victim of circumstance, but as the orchestrator of an unthinkable crime. His alibi unraveled as investigators traced his movements, analyzed the 283 steps recorded by his phone in a short span, and confirmed that his public persona of grief was carefully calculated deception. The Moselle estate, once a symbol of Southern affluence and influence, became a crime scene that would captivate a nation. The chilling truth was undeniable. In a span of minutes, Alex Murdaugh had extinguished 2 lives to protect secrets that could no longer remain hidden. And as law enforcement began piecing together the timeline, the Murdaugh empire's facade of power and invincibility began to crumble, revealing the darkness at its core. The morning after the Moselle murders, the sprawling estate transformed from a symbol of wealth and power into a meticulously examined crime scene. Investigators from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, known as SLED, took control immediately, knowing that unraveling what had truly happened on June 7, 2021, required precision. Every footprint, every phone ping, every fragment of forensic evidence mattered. What they uncovered would shock even those familiar with the Murdaugh family's history of influence and deception. Alex Murdaugh, presenting himself as a grieving father and husband, called 911 at 10:07 p.m., claiming he had discovered the bodies of Maggie and Paul near the dog kennels. His voice, shaking and distressed, painted a picture of a man devastated by an unimaginable tragedy.
Can they hurry?
They are. Yes, sir. That gentleman that was out here already, he's one of the battalion chiefs, okay? How did you pull up? You from back there?
I went to the house and they weren't home, which was odd. I tried to call.
Okay.
And then I knew they had been down here before I left to go to my mom's.
Okay.
And so that is loaded.
Okay.
You might want to unload it. But I mean...
But the physical and digital evidence told another story entirely. Investigators soon examined Snapchat videos Paul had recorded that evening, capturing Alex's voice near the kennels, contradicting his initial claims that he had been elsewhere. Phone records confirmed both Maggie's and Paul's devices went dark within seconds of one another, and Alex's movements, tracked via his phone, revealed frantic packing and trips around the estate consistent with premeditated actions. The investigation quickly expanded beyond the murders themselves. Alex's financial crimes, long hidden behind the prestige of the family law firm, began to surface in full detail. For nearly 20 years, he had stolen millions of dollars from grieving clients, diverting settlement funds into a fake account under the name Richard Alexander Murdaugh DBA Forge. Among the most egregious instances was the theft from the family of Gloria Satterfield, the longtime housekeeper, who had passed away in 2018. The settlement meant to compensate her sons for her death, totaling $4.3 million, had been funneled straight into Alex's account. These were not isolated incidents. Clients who trusted him with their worst moments had been systematically defrauded. Investigators also scrutinized Alex's behavior and statements. His alibi crumbled under forensic evidence and witness accounts. SLED agents discovered that his step patterns, vehicle movements, and the timeline of phone activity could not be reconciled with his claims.
The sentencing sheets signed up, if I can hand those up to the clerk. Your Honor, very quickly, the defendant has no prior record, and the state has no victim impact people who want to speak at this time. But I will address the court briefly. And I don't need Your Honor to repeat the evidence that Your Honor just heard for the past 6 weeks, but it is overwhelming. And it shows this man to be a cunning manipulator, a man who placed himself above all others, including his family. A man who violated the trust of so many, including his friends, his family, his partners, his profession, but most of all, Maggie and Paul.
He lied to the police, misrepresented his presence at the kennels, and attempted to direct attention elsewhere. Each lie was another thread in a web of deception, revealing a man willing to manipulate truth to protect his secrets. By the end of the investigation, the scope of Alex Murdaugh's actions became terrifyingly clear. Murder, theft, fraud, and betrayal were all part of a calculated pattern. The Murdaugh dynasty, long considered untouchable, was exposed for the first time. Alex's empire of lies, built over decades, was collapsing under the weight of evidence, and the question looming over South Carolina was no longer just about greed or addiction. It was about justice. And justice, as investigators were determined to prove, would not be denied. January 25, 2023, marked the beginning of one of the most closely watched trials in modern American history. In the small courtroom of Walterboro, South Carolina, the stage was set. Judge Clifton Newman presiding, a team of prosecutors led by Creighton Waters, and the defendant, Alex Murdaugh, facing 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. The nation's eyes were on a man whose name had once symbolized power, privilege, and untouchable influence, but whose empire of lies was now under the harsh glare of justice. The prosecution's case was meticulously constructed. Every piece of evidence, phone records, Snapchat videos, forensic timelines, eyewitness testimony, painted a picture of premeditation. The 8:44 p.m. Snapchat video recorded by Paul at the dog kennels became a cornerstone of the case. It captured Alex's voice near the kennels just minutes before the murders, directly contradicting his repeated claims that he had been elsewhere. SLED agent Jeff Croft detailed Alex's movements, step by step, revealing frantic packing, trips across the estate, and phone activity that aligned precisely with the timeline of the killings. Witnesses took the stand to expose the depth of Alex's deception. His law firm's CFO, Gene Seckinger, recounted confronting him about missing client funds on the morning of June 7, 2021. Nearly $800,000 in unaccounted funds had vanished, a precursor to the violent acts that would unfold that evening. Testimony about his long history of theft and fraud further cemented the prosecution's argument that Alex had a motive. By eliminating Maggie and Paul, he could delay financial exposure and maintain the facade of a grieving father. When Alex took the stand, against his attorney's advice, the courtroom tension was palpable. He admitted to stealing millions of dollars and lying to investigators about his whereabouts. He cited his addiction as an explanation, yet denied harming his wife or son. Cross-examination by Creighton Waters was relentless. "You lied to Maggie?" Waters asked. "Yes," Alex admitted. "You lied to Paul?" "Yes." "You lied to your law partners?" "Yes." Each admission built the narrative of a man who had spent decades mastering deception, undermining any credibility he tried to claim. After 6 intense weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 3 hours. On March 2, 2023, Alex Murdaugh was found guilty on all counts. The verdict was swift, but the impact was seismic. Judge Newman sentenced Alex to life in prison without the possibility of parole, delivering a haunting warning about the man Alex had become and the consequences of his choices. Alex maintained his innocence even as the evidence spoke louder than words, but the court had spoken. Justice, after years of deception and betrayal, had finally been served. Even after the dramatic conviction and life sentence of Alex Murdaugh, the story was far from over. Within months, whispers of misconduct began to surface, claims that could potentially unravel the verdict that had seemed final. Central to this new chapter was Becky Hill, the Colleton County Clerk of Court during Alex's trial. Sworn statements from multiple jurors alleged that Hill had improperly influenced the jury. Some claimed she had made comments suggesting Alex's guilt, instructing them to watch his actions closely as he testified. Others noted that she appeared to have a personal investment in the trial's outcome. The allegations went deeper than casual bias. Evidence emerged that Becky Hill had been negotiating a book deal about the Murdaugh case before the trial concluded. The defense argued that her financial interest in a conviction created a direct conflict of interest, potentially contaminating the jury's impartiality. In other words, the very official tasked with overseeing court operations might have had a motive to sway the trial for personal gain, a claim that struck at the heart of Alex's constitutional right to a fair trial. In January 2024, retired South Carolina Supreme Court Chief Justice Jean Toll held an evidentiary hearing to examine the allegations. Jurors testified about Hill's conduct, describing moments that ranged from subtle suggestions to overt statements about Alex's guilt. Hill herself took the stand, attempting to downplay the accusations. While Judge Toll acknowledged that Hill had acted inappropriately and that her credibility was seriously compromised, she ultimately ruled there was insufficient evidence to prove that the jury's verdict had been materially affected. The life sentence stood, at least for the time being. But Alex's defense team wasn't finished. They immediately appealed to the South Carolina Supreme Court, setting the stage for a pivotal showdown scheduled for February 11, 2026. The appeal expanded beyond the allegations against Hill. The defense claimed investigative failures, mishandled forensic evidence, and improperly admitted financial evidence all contributed to what they called a fatally compromised trial. They argued that critical alternative suspect evidence was ignored and that the crime scene had been contaminated, raising questions about the integrity of the entire investigation. The state, on the other hand, maintained that the guilty verdict was the result of careful deliberation. Prosecutors emphasized the overwhelming evidence: the kennel video, phone timelines, forensic reconstructions, and Alex's decades of deception. They argued that the alleged misconduct by Becky Hill, while troubling, could not have influenced the jury's conclusion given the strength of the case against him. As February 11 approaches, the tension in South Carolina is palpable. Will the Supreme Court grant a new trial, or will Alex Murdaugh's conviction remain unshaken? Every lawyer, every juror, and every citizen watching wonders, can a single act of potential jury tampering overshadow a mountain of evidence? This is the chapter where justice, influence, and human ambition collide, and the outcome is anything but certain. The story of Alex Murdaugh is not just about crime. It is about power, privilege, and the lengths some will go to protect both. For nearly a century, the Murdaugh family dominated South Carolina's legal system, wielding influence that seemed untouchable. But in the space of just a few years, that dynasty unraveled. Murder, fraud, and deception exposed the dark underbelly of wealth and authority. Alex's life, once the picture of Southern success, became a cautionary tale. No empire, no matter how strong, is immune to its own corruption. Now, as the February 11, 2026, Supreme Court hearing looms, the future of justice hangs in the balance. The court will decide whether alleged jury tampering and procedural failures are enough to grant Alex a new trial, or whether the overwhelming evidence of his guilt will leave the original verdict intact. Lawyers, legal analysts, and the public alike are watching closely. A new trial could reopen wounds for the victims' families, reignite media scrutiny, and challenge public faith in the justice system. If the conviction stands, it will reinforce the message that even the most influential figures cannot escape accountability. But beyond legal technicalities, this story forces a deeper reflection. How does power shield wrongdoing? How do privilege and deception shape the truth? The Murdaugh case has become more than a murder trial. It is a study in human behavior under pressure, the consequences of unchecked ambition, and the fragility of trust. Families were destroyed, communities were shaken, and a nation watched as one man's choices left irreversible damage. For those following the case, the questions remain. Can justice be fully served when systemic influence collides with human greed? Will the courts protect the integrity of the original trial, or will the shadow of jury misconduct change history? And ultimately, what does the Murdaugh saga teach us about accountability in a world where money, status, and reputation can often mask the truth? As we wait for the Supreme Court's decision, the story continues to unfold. It is a reminder that even in the darkest corners of power and crime, the truth has a way of surfacing, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, but always with consequences. Watch closely, question everything, and never take appearances at face value. The law may take its course, but the human stories behind it are far more complex and haunting than any verdict could capture. The saga of Alex Murdaugh is far more than a crime story. It is a study in power, deception, and the fragility of trust. From a respected attorney and family patriarch to a convicted murderer and fraudster, Alex's journey shows how ambition, addiction, and greed can twist a life and destroy those around it. The Murdaugh dynasty, once untouchable, is now a cautionary tale of what happens when influence is used to shield wrongdoing. Even with a life sentence in hand, the story isn't finished. The upcoming Supreme Court hearing on February 11, 2026, could reopen the case, bringing new legal battles and questions about fairness, integrity, and justice. Will Alex Murdaugh ever face a new trial, or will the overwhelming evidence ensure that the original verdict stands? The answers remain uncertain, but the stakes could not be higher, not just for Alex, but for the victims' families and the public's trust in the justice system. This case also forces us to confront deeper questions. How far will someone go to protect secrets? How does privilege manipulate the truth? And when deception is layered over murder and betrayal, who ultimately holds the power of justice? For those following this story, one thing is clear. The Murdaugh saga is a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and even the most powerful individuals are not immune to accountability. As the legal drama continues to unfold, the lessons of this case remain chilling, unforgettable, and deeply human. If you've been captivated by this story, don't just watch, engage. Comment your thoughts on the Supreme Court appeal, share the video with someone who cares about justice, and make sure to like and subscribe to Dark Corner True Crime. Every view, every share, and every subscription helps us continue to uncover the truth behind the most shocking and complex criminal cases. Stay tuned, because in true crime, the story is never truly over, and neither is the pursuit of justice.